Samsung is one of the largest smartphone manufacturers in the world. Ever since the launch of the original Samsung Galaxy S, the company has established itself as a builder of premium phones, mid-range options, and budget devices, meaning that the company offers something for everyone. And as a result, hundreds of millions of people own its phones and use One UI, the company's Android skin. Now on its second iteration, One UI is easily the best Android skin Samsung has ever built. But what are the major differences between it and stock Android? I put the two head to head to find out. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps support my work and I would appreciate that support. Unlike a skin like OnePlus's Oxygen OS, Samsung has made a number of major changes to One UI, from the way that it looks, to certain controls, to even the basic feel of the operating system. There are even a number of apps that you'll find on One UI that don't show up in stock Android. Perhaps the most immediate and obvious change is the design of One UI compared to stock Android. For example, app icons are larger with rounded corners and flatter colors. But that's just the tip of the iceberg in the differences. The ambient display and lock screen on Samsung phones is completely customizable, with a range of different options for different clock styles, the ability to tweak notifications, and so on. You can add widgets to the ambient display too, allowing you to get more information than you otherwise would. On stock Android, you still have some control, but really for things like the ability to tweak notifications and turn on or off the now playing music recognition feature. The home screens in the two versions of Android are pretty different too. Both versions allow you to install a range of widgets. However, Samsung may have a few more considering the fact that Samsung phones have more apps out of the box. And you can tweak more things like the app grid on the home screen, allowing users to swipe down on the home screen to access their notification panel and so on. Stock Android in general takes a less is more approach to most of how it's built and how it operates. While you'll get fewer controls, not everyone needs a huge range of controls, and for some, a more streamlined and bite-sized approach is appreciated. Stock apps in One UI have a slightly different look to Google's stock apps. That's because Samsung has very much developed One UI to be easy to use with one hand, meaning that in apps like the clock and gallery, most of the content is in the bottom half of the screen, while the top half is reserved for headings and less accessed features. It's a nice touch, and certainly does help with one-handed use. One of stock Android's staple features is the Google feed, which you can access by swiping to the left of the home screen. The Google feed has been tweaked and tweaked for years, and it generally offers good recommendations for things like weather, articles you might want to read, and so on. Samsung's version of that is Bixby Home, which seems to recommend apps and services more than articles, and to that end it can be a little less useful for some. That said, Bixby Home is pretty well designed, and it matches the rest of the overall feel of One UI. The app drawer is pretty different too. One of the main ways that One UI's app drawer is a little more useful is the fact that you can make folders of apps in the app drawer, while stock Android really only offers a big list of apps. Now, the argument for stock Android here is that most will prefer to make folders on the home screen anyway, but the fact that it's an option on One UI is still a nice touch. Speaking of apps, Samsung has long been accused of shipping too much bloatware with its phones, and it's easy to see why. With this Samsung Galaxy A51, there's a whole folder of Microsoft apps that many users won't ever want or need. It's certainly not as bad as Android skins like LG UX, or as bad as older Samsung skins like TouchWiz. But most will want to choose their own apps out of the box. And you can't uninstall most of the apps too. So while you can disable some of them, they still exist on your phone and take up storage. On stock Android, on the other hand, you'll get mostly Google apps, and many of those apps serve as core features to Android in general. Google could still arguably be accused of shipping some bloatware, but definitely less so than Samsung. Of course, along with Bixby Home, on Samsung's One UI, you'll also get Bixby. That's pretty annoying. Bixby simply isn't anywhere near as good as Google Assistant. It doesn't recognize commands as regularly, it doesn't work with as many smart home devices, and developers haven't taken to it like they have Google Assistant. Still, One UI still has the Google Assistant built into it since it's still Android, so that's nice to see. Next up is the notification shade, and while it's similar between stock Android and One UI, there are some differences. One UI, for example, allows you to turn off your device from the notification shade. Plus you can search, and there are more quick settings to make use of. On this Samsung Galaxy A51, there are 25 quick settings tiles, while on the Pixel 4 there are only 9. On One UI, by default, you'll get a 3-button navigation system, while stock Android has fully transitioned to Google's gesture-based navigation system. Annoyingly, for those who are used to other Android skins, One UI places the multitasking button on the left of the navigation bar, while traditionally it has been on the right. but thankfully you can change that if you want. You can't customize controls for long pressing these buttons, which is a little frustrating, but you'll get used to how it works. On One UI, you can still switch to gesture controls if you want, which is good considering the fact that over time, gesture controls will become more standard. Then there are features like One UI's dual messenger feature, which lets you sign into multiple accounts with one chatting app. It's similar to OnePlus's parallel apps, and a feature that stock Android doesn't offer. There are dozens of other tweaks and differences that I could go over, but the gist of things is the same. Samsung offers more controls and options, but the result is that One UI can sometimes feel a little intimidating or feel like a little much. Stock Android offers a more stripped back approach, but the result of that is that sometimes you won't be able to tweak or change things that you want to change. Ultimately, it comes down to personal preference. I might get some hate for this, but I actually prefer the stripped back approach to stock Android, even though it simply can't do as much or doesn't have as many options as One UI. Others might prefer the options and don't mind the occasional clutter. Thanks so much for watching this video, and again, please subscribe to my channel if it was helpful to you. My name is Christian, and I'll see you next time. See ya.